You're listening to Musings with Morales. Brought to you by Dialysis Education Services.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Morales. I'm really excited about this next guest. I, by chance, ran across this young lady, and I had no idea what I was in store for. I saw this Instagram message or this Instagram ad of a documentary called Nurse Unseen, and it really attracted me right away. It's a story that we're going to get into tonight, but as I became interested in it socially, I started to run across it not just through the social media, but my actual social crowd. I received a message from a person that was attending a conference recently, and they actually did a private screening of this documentary, Nurse Unseen, so it created even more attraction. And I'm looking forward to going out and seeing this documentary October 11th with a bunch of friends. Let me give you a little bit of the accolades of this young lady. Again, a Emmy Award-winning Filipino filmmaker. Her works include several documentaries that I think, if you haven't seen them already, are really going to challenge you to look at how you look at life and how you look at people, and whether you've actually been exposed to enough to different avenues of life, different areas of the world, different cultures, to truly appreciate the contributions that different sort of people different than you and I have in this world. I want to go through a list of the documentaries that I know of, and then invite Michele on to share kind of what's going on in the current and in the future. First, there is a documentary named Matt Shepard is a friend of mine. This is a deeply emotional exploration of love and loss, and we'll let Michele share the personal connection and purpose behind making this documentary. Happy Jail, which actually I think I watched the entire series of this, a story of the dancing inmates in the Philippines. Really happy documentary, but also shed some real light on the politics and the way that things work on the other side of the world. Food and Roots, following a restaurateur on a journey to reconnect with culture, culinary heritage in the Philippines again. And then again, most recently, to my knowledge, the Nurse Unseen documentary that highlights the Filipino-American nurses and the often overlooked contributions of Filipino nurses globally, really, specifically during the pandemic. Michele, Josue, thank you so much for taking the invitation, and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me and for your very kind, thoughtful introduction, and for watching my films. That's really wonderful. So thank you. It's really nice to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. Like I said, I'm excited. It's been kind of a workup with all of the recent exposures through social and social networks. Let's kind of dive into Michele, Josue. Like I've watched, I've studied, and I'm so intrigued by this storyteller, this yearning to really share stories that sometimes maybe people don't want to hear, maybe sometimes people don't want to acknowledge, and sometimes people don't even know that they are overlooking or need to acknowledge it. So tell me, Michele, let's go all the way back. Let's go back to childhood. And tell me, were there pivotal moments? Were there pivotal people? Were there pivotal values that led to this storyteller and this award-winning filmmaker?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to reflect. That's really nice. I mean, to answer your question, as a child, I've always was interested in storytelling and being other people, or being very interested in other people's experiences. So as long as I can remember, in the neighborhood where I grew up, I was always, acting and making little short plays with my friends. And when we got home video cameras, we were making, all types of movies and just shooting a lot of stuff and just being really like playful and exploring our growing identities in this way. And then when I was in middle school, I got shipped to boarding school. So I went to boarding school in Switzerland. And that was a really pivotal experience for me because I just got to know so much about European culture, and the school was really beautiful, and everything was about the beauty around the campus, and we could see so many iconic works of art when we were going to school trips, like to Florence or Paris. And I was really I was shown all of this type of stuff very early on when I was, quite young, and I got into theater there in middle school and high school, and I just fell in love with, the stage and acting. Initially, I wanted to be an actress, and then later in high school, I started writing my own short plays and casting my friends in them, and I just really loved that aspect of storytelling, kind of the, being in control, but also collaborating with a team and really working together to create, a certain vision. So that love just kind of grew from there. And I applied to Emerson College for film school. And, I just really loved my experience, getting to know about everything it takes to make a movie. And then, as you mentioned, my first film, Matt Shepard is a friend of mine, is deeply emotional. So to backtrack, when I was a sophomore in college, one of my best friends from that high school in Switzerland that I was telling you about, his name is Matthew Shepard, or Matt as we called him. He was murdered in Laramie, Wyoming in 1998 because he is gay. And that incident was completely devastating to me. And I was in film school when this happened. And, I just witnessed how the world was reacting to what happened to him. And everything in the news about Matt, really truncated who he was. It was all about the horrific way in which he died, but there was nothing in the news about who he really was as a person beyond, what had happened to him. Yeah. So back then I, made it my mission to eventually get to a place where I could tell his story with, dignity and respect and sensitivity. So, I did whatever I could to get that experience, that professional experience, but I always knew down the line that would be the first film that I would make, this film, pay tribute to who Matt was as a person. And making that film it took a lot out of me. Like I had never made a feature film before. It was really, really difficult. It's something I'm really proud of, but it was really hard. But I think, most fulfilling things are hard. Yeah. And after that movie, I felt that any project I wanted to work on after that, I wanted it to be similar in scope. I wanted it to be, meaningful work that would help tell stories that don't often get amplified or celebrated in mainstream media. So, the films that you outlined in the beginning, Matt Shepard is a friend of mine, Happy Jail, Food Roots, and now Nurse Unseen, they're all widely different, but in essence, it's really about telling a story that doesn't really get to be told very often.
Yeah, as you speak through that, I get kind of a confused feeling, or it's got to be just put you in awe that you had the skills to share the story. You mentioned like the desire to do film and the filmmaking, and you were equipped with the skills to tell such a personal story with somebody that and share things that only you know. Like, do you ever look back at that and go like, what if I would have been a CPA? Would the story have been told? Not everybody has a Michele Josue in their life who is going to tell their story, right? And how many? I mean, it just makes me think as I hear through like these stories that you've chosen to tell, how many other unseen or untold stories are there and people that don't have somebody with enough courage like you to go out and build the story and tell the story, research, build, and tell the story.
Well, thank you for putting it that way. I think, I never stopped to be like, can I do this? Am I going to fail? There was no question that I was going to take it on. And if it wasn't as great or as beautiful as I wanted it to be in my mind, at least I tried. Like, for instance, with Matt, the story that I was going to tell, the perspective in which I was going to tell it was genuine. And I think people respond to that. So, I don't know. I wish I knew how to do other things. I think financially I'd be better off, but it's just something that I feel like I was put on this earth to do. And I feel that I've gotten good at it, because I like working with people. I like really listening to people. I like the technical aspects of everything. And it's just like, I just feel really blessed to be, in this profession and to create, these works that I've gotten to be a part of. So I do feel really honored. I feel really blessed. But if I was the CPA, I probably would be able to be more financially well off, I think.
Well, I'm really, I'm hoping that that's all going to be fulfilled through what your real purpose here. I mean, it's very evident that the stories that you're telling need to be told. People need to hear them. And the impact of telling these stories and these stories being heard, really, it's a change of perspective. It's empathy. It's the ability to care for people. So I'm 100% in support of you staying where you're at, Michele.
Thank you. I think the world needs a lot more empathy and a lot of more, listening and heartfelt storytelling and, tender storytelling. And, my work tends to be really heartfelt and emotional. And I think, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think people respond to it. And, we need a little bit more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. So I mentioned I got a message from a friend not long ago, and I guess you and the crew were out doing a special screening in Atlanta recently, Michele?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you tell me what that special screening was, and why that group, why that audience? Was there any sort of special connection to that audience?
Sure. So with Nurse Unseen being, such an independent production and really community-led from the very beginning, we don't have your traditional distribution like with a studio or anything at the moment. So a lot of this has really been, just through the community, like contacting different organizations, different employee groups or Filipino organizations, and partnering with them to bring Nurse Unseen, to their members, and really being together and watching this important film and having, meaningful, enriching discussions afterwards. That's what I had always envisioned for this film, and why I feel it's really important to be, doing it in this grassroots way and just really, taking it to people and sharing it in real life, especially having gone through, the pandemic and lockdown and being separated from one another. Being back in touch and reconnecting with community is just so vital and so important. So we've been doing that for quite a bit, simultaneous to our film festival journey. We've been doing these community screening engagements. My producing partner, Carlo, had reached out to the American Nephrology Nurses Association. It was pretty much a cold email, someone who had seen the film recommended we reach out to this group. So he did, and they were really interested in hearing more about the film, really interested in bringing the film to their summit in Atlanta. And we found out the reason why is because their president, for the very first time in the organization's history, is Asian American, and she's Filipino American. So finding out about our film was something that was like really important to her, because it was it is her story too. So she invited us to Atlanta, and this just happened, like, I want to say last week, or the weekend before.
Yeah. I was just at a conference, and I think the day before I was at this conference last week, they were reaching out to me saying, you know, we just saw this, and you really got to see if you can get in touch. So I'm happy that we're able to make the connection. Michele, I actually come from that space as well, nephrology space. I grew up with somebody that was on dialysis and ended up in the profession as a dialysis technician and running facilities. And now I work in medical device. I work with a lot of nurses, a lot of doctors, and the dialysis space specifically, you know, the nursing and the professional front is heavily represented by Filipino workers. I've said it many times on the podcast here, but when I think about the day that I passed, Paco's going to laugh, but the day that I passed, the last face I want to see is a Filipino, and it could be my wife or one of my kids or a very kind and caring nurse. But you know, I totally have a deep appreciation and respect for Filipino nurses. So tell me about the you know, what in the Filipino nursing community is being highlighted in the film. I'm so excited to see it, but what exactly is being highlighted other than the good things that I said, like, you know, the great caring nurses and dependability and great skills, but what's being highlighted in this that we would call it unseen, Michele?
Sure. Well, I'll give you a little bit of background to kind of fill in that picture for you. I actually got really emotional at that summit. I totally wasn't expecting it. My aunt, Dodo Cueva, she was essentially my second mom and grew up with us, you know, from childhood all the way till, you know, my high school. And she was very impactful, you know, in all of our lives. Yeah. You know, we were like scared of her. She was kind of the matriarch of the entire family. Super strong, but very, very kind. And she was a veteran oncology nurse at a children's hospital in Washington, D.C. She was the first of my mom's family to come over here to the U.S. Mm-hmm. So nursing was always, you know, such a personal and important part of family and who I am. But I just took that for granted. Mm-hmm. I never really stopped to ask her why she went into nursing. I never really stopped to examine, you know, the bigger cultural questions, like why are there so many Filipinos that go into nursing? And she passed. She passed several years ago before I got to ask her all of these questions. And she passed because she had she had a lot of complications. She was going through dialysis for the last few years of her life. And that's why I got very emotional because I was in this room and I just, you know, the whole film is in tribute to her, really. That she was, you know, the reason why I wanted to make this film was in large part to do something to honor her as well as, you know, all of our Filipino American nurses. So to be in that room with those who, you know, cared for her at the end of her life, it just made me very, very emotional. Yeah. So, and it was a surprise to me. But, you know, with this film, it really does speak to so many things in the Filipino American experience or the Filipino experience beyond just, there's so many Filipinos in nursing and they're so caring and so wonderful. Mm-hmm. It really delves into, you know, in the beginning, my personal reasons for making the film, and then it kind of zooms out and really outlines the history of why so many Filipinos became nurses, and that's in large part or directly in part because of American colonization and Americans coming over and teaching Filipinos Americanized nursing and creating this pipeline for Filipino nurses to immigrate, you know, to the U.S. And, you know, the Philippines is the largest exporter of nurses worldwide. Yes. And the fact that I never, you know, stopped to question or be more curious about that is really embarrassing. But, you know.
Well, now you're embarrassing me. Now you're embarrassing me. I mean, the same thing is, you know, I've been in healthcare for, 25 years now. And to tell you the truth, I know I'm going to learn a whole lot from watching your documentary in a couple of weeks here, as far as colonization. I recently made a trip, Michele, to the Philippines and actually got to visit some of the nursing campuses. And it was incredible. I really got to tell you, it was incredible. I got back to LAX and I was like, oh my God, I'm back to USA. Just the level of compassion that I felt from everybody. But when I went to this campus, a nursing campus, I was so impressed with the level of humaneness and approachability and, genuine love that I saw even in the classroom. So it's of no surprise to me that it's the largest exporter. The Philippines is the largest exporter of nurses, but I'm really interested in finding out the why, the history that you just described to us.
Yeah, and it's definitely shared in the film, in the first part of the film, because I wanted to provide that historical context for people like myself who were never taught that history.
Yeah.
But also it moves forward in time, so we can look back at our current history with COVID and how our Filipino nurses were so vulnerable to the virus and what they sacrificed and how they helped us get through that whole crisis. And it's something that's still ongoing. But it's, I felt that this film was really necessary, that, we needed to know what was happening. And it's really important. So I really am excited for you to see the film, and I'm excited for other people to see the film too. And I really appreciate you finding us and,
Likewise.
And wanting to support in the way that you are.
Michele, you mentioned that part of I think I saw it in one of your interviews, that part of the story or part of the hope or purpose for Nurse Unseen is also to share the story with non-Filipino audiences. And again, I'll kind of go back to the unseen. Like, what do you want? I guess you were in a similar spot as well, maybe not knowing the history, and I'm in a similar spot, but what all do you want those that are not even acknowledging or not seeing the Filipino worker, the Filipino nurse in the United States? What is the message that you're trying to put out through Nurse Unseen?
I think it's getting back to that humanity and that empathy. I'd love for the community outside of the Filipino community to just know more about what we're all about who we are.
Yeah.
Going back to my first work with Matt Shepard as a friend of mine, I lost a best friend to bigotry and hatred and intolerance. The people who murdered him did so out of fear and hate for what they deemed as being other, or less than.
Yeah.
In COVID, we were really seeing just the worst of us way. I mean, the best of us too, of course, but also, just really awful headlines being paraded throughout the news. We were seeing the resurgence of anti-Asian hate.
Yeah.
And with that, again, like with Matt, I think it all comes down to people just not seeing our humanity and tapping into that empathy for people who are unlike themselves. So it's really about giving people the opportunity to know who we are. Yeah. And once, you know what someone's about, you're way less inclined to hate them, let alone attack them. So it all comes from that, just wanting to share that humanity and just come together a little bit more.
Yeah, it's really crazy that I remember that time and did a lot of work during COVID as well on a public health side. But I have 4 children that are all half Filipino. And of course, I didn't feel that hate, right? But they felt it. They were in school. They were, feeling the pressure and the hate. Yeah, the different sort of things that they were throwing out there as far as what they were saying about Asians and different sort of attacks. So I didn't feel it. My kids did, and they would come home and they would tell me, and I would just be like, I really didn't know what to say, to tell you the truth. It was very difficult for me to help them navigate that hate, because I've always loved the Filipino community. Like, I just can't understand anybody hating another community for being who they are. You don't have to agree. You don't have to do the same things as people, but to hate somebody is really something that's I just can't comprehend.
I appreciate you saying that. Definitely I feel the same way. Everyone is deserving of respect and compassion, and acceptance. So I understand why that might be so shocking for you to be confronted with. I mean, what we all went through with COVID was just so shocking. And to backtrack, we really wanted this film to be an important document, not only of the history of why so many Filipinos came into nursing and immigrated to the United States, but a historical snapshot of what we had just went through, and nurses in particular. I'm not a nurse. I'm sorry, disappointed my family by not going into nursing, but just to know what they all went through is really important. Having to, go home and not be able to be in the same physical space as their family, and not having enough PPE, and just generally not feeling, safe, and being so scared at that time. That's something that, us who weren't on the front lines, that we can't really even comprehend. And just the amount of sickness and death and all of the loss, it's just something that, as a society, we really should reflect on. And I think there's just this movement to really just get past all of that and just to keep going and pretend it didn't happen. But I think it's really important for us to discuss and really process that time.
I was reading an article today, and I think it was in NIH, but it was a study, and I can't remember the cohort on it, but the number of nurses that said they're still not okay after the COVID pandemic, or I should say we still have COVID, but we're not in the depth of things, that still say that they're not okay. I mean, it's not just the death rates, but the psychosocial or psychological impact of COVID, the long haulers, the PTSD quite often. One of the things that's highlighted in the film or the documentary as well, I believe, is the disproportionate, if I'm using the right word, rate of death among Filipino nurses. Can you share a little bit about that? And are there any hypotheses that you could share around why?
Yeah, absolutely. So that study that you're, hinting at was something that was really the impetus for us to really move into action and start filming this film. So this was back in late 2021, I believe September 2021. National Nurses United came out with a study that outlined that Filipino nurses, although they only make up 4% of the United States registered nursing workforce, at the height of COVID, they made up over 31.5% of COVID nurse deaths. So just learning about that report and that tragic statistic was really heartbreaking, and was really the motivation for us to start moving with urgency and create this film, so we can unpack why, just let people know what was happening, that so many of our nurses were dying, and it wasn't really being reported very widely. So yes, again, that was the core motivation for us to really start, getting in gear and start making the film. And we found out that there was a lot of reasons why this was so. One of the main nurses in the film, who was the past president of the Filipino Nurses Association of America, she states in the film that of all of their members, 75% of them were on the front lines. So a lot of these Filipino nurses are in those bedside positions and critical care positions, and just having that, really close proximity to the virus, and getting more exposed. So that was a huge reason why, I think. And there's other factors, but it's really hard. Maybe, other nurse academics can speak to this with more authority, but without studies really disaggregating the data, we don't really know for sure, because a lot of studies end up, kind of combining Asian Americans under one umbrella. Right. But that Filipinos and, Vietnamese people and Koreans and Japanese, and you know, we all have widely different experiences, and so it's really hard to kind of just lump everyone together under Asian American.
Yeah.
But once those disaggregated studies are done, I think we can find a more specific reason for why that there was that disproportionate number. But really, the main reason is because so many of them are on the front lines.
So let's kind of backtrack a little bit. We've definitely, you know, if you guys are not scheduled or haven't secured your tickets nationwide, find Nurse Unseen, get to that documentary, support the cause, learn a little bit, and grow some empathy. But let's backtrack a little bit, Michele. Let's go back to Matt Shepard again. What do you really want people to feel, to reflect, to do with this story?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I feel it's the same with Nurse Unseen, essentially. What I hope for people to take away from Matt Shepard as a friend of mine is the same amount of love and loss that I felt, that I still feel. You know, Matt was an extraordinary person who had amazing potential. You know, he should still be here, you know, in his 40s, probably, you know, doing social work or in politics, who knows? He had a rich future ahead of him. So I want people to get to know who he was as a person and to feel as devastated as we all did when he was murdered. So it all boils down to, I think, that humanity and empathy. And, you know, it happened a long time ago, you know, back in 1998. So there's a lot of people, you know, a younger generation that have no idea about what happened to Matthew Shepard. And tragically, this isn't obsolete. You know, stories like this continue to happen. So it's a film, unfortunately, that is still relevant, and it has, you know, a lot of lessons that still need to be taught. Agreed.
You know, as I've kind of studied you, and as we've started this podcast in just January, just this year, we've evolved a little bit, and we've had a lot of guests, and it's really become the purpose to allow those stories to be heard. So, you know, I'm going to be kind of on your tailcoat, what do they call it? Coattails, taking notes on really how to draw out the humanity in these stories. I also think that I work with a group that is often unseen, and you talked about your connection there to the ANNA. I work very closely with people with chronic kidney disease, and I think that's also a group of people that are unseen and unheard, and just need a lot more attention. So that's kind of my main focus as far as attention, is to really tell those stories, tell the stories of the people that care for them. And you know, I've watched the Happy Jail. You know, Happy Jail. It seems like it's just a happy, fun project. You know, tell me about it. Was it pure Happy Jail? Were there dark sides to this? And what was the impression walking away from when you made this documentary?
Sure. So Happy Jail is my Netflix documentary series. It's still on the platform. So if you're listening, please check it out. It's a 5-part series about a jail that's home to the famous dancing inmates who rose to fame back in 2009 when they performed en masse to Michael Jackson's Thriller in their jail yard. When I saw YouTube video many years ago, and being Filipino, I was instantly, you know, intrigued and fascinated and wanted to make a feature film about this place, and wanting to know, how is this possible? And, you know, what happens after they dance, and how, you know, the origin of this program, all of that. So after Matt Shepard is a friend of mine, you know, we embarked on creating that film. And then when we were in the process of making it, we just ended up staying because so many things kept happening, and we ended up coming away with a 5-part, you know, series, just because we were there at a really dramatic point in time in the history of that jail. And I do want to say that the title Happy Jail, it's entitled that because the inmates themselves call it Happy Jail. And I think that's because of the dancing element. So it's just something that they were referring to. And, you know, we listened and we were like, that sounds like the perfect title for the show.
So you mentioned that it was like kind of a climactic time, I guess. I did watch it. Like, what was going on that made it so we've got to stay? Aside from the great choreography and shows that were put on, because I think they were kind of like a Super Bowl worthy almost, right? Like they're really good. Shows.
The dancing inmates at CPDRC, that's the jail facility in Cebu, Philippines. They are really good.
Yeah.
They're really great dancers. And they had a really amazing choreographer who was able to work with, you know, hundreds of inmates so that they could, you know, collaborate all together. And some of these inmates were charged, not convicted yet because it's a jail. They were charged with various crimes, from drug crimes to, you know, like murder, but they were all dancing and getting along for those routines. And that was just really wonderful to see, for lack of a better word. So we wanted to just document that, but it happened to be about 2 weeks after President Rodrigo Duterte took office in the Philippines, and he had enacted this war on drugs. And as a result, while we were filming in that jail, so many people from outside of the jail were surrendering themselves and just coming into the facility. So this facility was just unable to keep up with all these external pressures.
Gotcha.
So while we were there, we were witnessing sort of the jail, just experiencing a really challenging time.
So it was like overflow.
A lot of overflow, a lot of media scrutiny.
Yeah.
And then something happens in one of the episodes that really is just, you know, that piece, if you're playing Jenga, that everything
just all came toppling down.
Yeah. But that was a really amazing project, and I'm really proud of it and proud that it's still on the platform, and people, you know, all over the world who have Netflix can still see this, you know, documentary and just get a glimpse into what it's like to, you know, be in this facility, you know, on the other side of the world. I
got to tell you a little background about me. I actually grew up around a family. The males in my family were they were jailbirds growing up, you know. So my young days was kind of filled with learning about people who were sick, which was one of my family had kidney failure. And then other men in my family that, you know, kind of were always on vacation, we called it, right? They would end up in jail for a few years here or there. We'd be visiting back and forth. So I really, you know, hey, I loved them still. I had this empathy. I love those, you know, it was my uncle, my father. I loved them. I still love them, right? There's never been any waiver in that. And a lot of people say, like, you know, the word convict, or been to jail. And that can be like an undesirable, you know, for some crowds, right? So what's the story that you were trying to tell? You saw the video. Were you trying to capture the dancing? Were you trying to capture the ability to be happy in this environment? Or was there something else that you were trying to tell?
Initially, yeah. You're right. Initially, it was really about documenting how, you know, this program could be possible. And, you know, being Filipino, I'm really inspired and proud of how and this is generally speaking, how Filipinos tend to find the joy in even the most tragic or challenging circumstance. And, you know, here it was, you know, you're dancing in this facility. So that was my initial impulse, why I wanted to go there and tell that story. But as I, you know, spent more time there and got to know a lot of these inmates quite well, and a lot of the people who were running the jail too, it became less about the dancing and more about, again, humanity and kind of the gray. It wasn't about like black and white, these people in jail are bad because maybe they had done something bad in their past.
Yeah.
It was really about just showing who these people are as human beings, not as like inmates who are charged with a crime and therefore not worthy of just basic dignity or even having a voice. So it was really about bearing witness to their experience and showing that they're still human beings who are able to find community amongst themselves and able to survive through, this camaraderie and through dance or, various different things. There is an ongoing thread to my work. It really is about just giving people the opportunity to see people a little bit more deeply and with a little bit more nuance than you might, without knowing much about them.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. And it segue into your help with, it's Food Roots, right?
Yeah, it's called Food Roots. Mm-hmm.
So really delving into the heritage of the culinary identity. And can you tell me the chef's name again?
Sure. So Food Roots is a documentary about Filipino-American celebrity restaurateur Billy Deck. And he's based in Chicago and also Nashville. Mm-hmm. And I had the pleasure of getting to know him at an event in Chicago. And we just really connected on, our mutual love of storytelling and also wanting to keep telling, more diverse stories in, this mainstream space. And he was telling me that he had all this footage from when he went back to the Philippines in 2019, just inspired to discover the recipes of his ancestors. And he had all this footage and he wanted to see if I would watch it and what I would do with it. And so I was really honored and really excited by this prospect and watched all the dailies and realized that there was something more beyond just, him learning how to cook these various recipes. It was really, there was a deeper story about Billy, going back to the motherland and finding a different part of himself and reconnecting to his Filipino identity and to his family in a deeper way. And I think, a lot of Filipino Americans, a lot of immigrants can really relate to that story. So that's why I wanted to be a part of it.
You didn't get to try the food then?
Oh, I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because we would do reshoots, and then we did a whole shoot with him at his restaurant in Nashville. And his restaurant's called Sunda. So he has two Sunda restaurants in Chicago, one in Nashville, one in Tampa. He's really expanding. But
I definitely will stop in there next time I'm in one of those cities.
Check it out.
Yeah.
It's really amazing food.
So since I asked you about the food, did you run through a routine with the inmates at the Happy Jail?
I dance with them.
All right. Sure. Do we have footage of this?
Yeah, definitely. There's footage somewhere.
It's not in the documentary though.
No, it's not about me. It was really about about the inmates.
Great. So I hope you kept up.
They're really good teachers though. So
you've traveled a lot, Michele. You mentioned that you were sent to boarding school, or you attended boarding school. Where did you come from? Yeah. Like, were you born in the U.S.? Were you born in the Philippines? Yeah. You were born in the U.S.?
My parents are from the Philippines. They're from the Visayas. And then my mom immigrated in her early 20s. She followed her sister, my aunt, who came over in 1968 to be a foreign exchange visitor nurse. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in Burtonsville, Maryland, on the East Coast.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I went to boarding school in Lugano, Switzerland, from 7th grade to 12th grade. And then I went to Emerson College in Boston to study film. Mm-hmm. And then I came out to Los Angeles because, when you want to do film, they say that's where you go. So I came out to California and I just really fell in love with Los Angeles, and I've stayed.
You've traveled a lot. What's your favorite place that you've been? I heard about some of
Oh my
the
goodness.
circuits, but like, what's the favorite spot and why?
As they say, it's more fun in the Philippines, and it really is. So I do try to go back at least once or twice a year. There's just nothing like it. So that's my favorite place to go to. But, I did spend a big chunk of my, adolescence in Europe. So I do feel like Lugano, Switzerland is home to me in a way. So I do like to go there as well.
I recently took a trip to the Philippines for the first time with my wife, and I'll agree that it's, I don't know more fun than what, but it's super fun. Probably I can only spend so much time there, or else I'll burn out on the fun and the good food, right?
Right.
And then recently took a trip to Europe as well, where I visited Amsterdam, which I think you had some screenings over there, and maybe some awards over there as well.
Yeah.
And then Czech Republic. And when you were talking about your boarding school days and just the history and the beauty, I was not prepared for the beauty that I saw around the world. I mean, I've really been stuck here in Los Angeles for my whole life. So these recent travels have made me actually say the opposite of what I said my whole life, as far as like, I'm not going to travel, I'll be working all the time. Now I really want to travel. I'm ready to go. And Philippines is on the list again. Tell us about challenges, Michele. What's the real challenge in being Michele Josue and bringing these stories out?
Yeah. So with everything, there's challenges and, inherent in any profession. Being an indie filmmaker, it's just making sure that what you're doing is financially tenable. Like I was joking about in the beginning of the show, it's hard to make a living, making these types of films. Yeah. Luckily, documentary is very attractive to people now. It wasn't, many years ago, but it's definitely, people are watching documentaries more and the studios are buying them. So that's exciting. But, many years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case. So it's really about finding, financial support or industry support to tell the type of films, that I tend to make, and just trying to convince them that there is a sizable audience, a passionate audience that will show up and watch films like Nurse Unseen or Happy Jail, or Matt Shepard is a friend of mine. So that's just an ongoing problem. But again, I know these projects are worthy, and I feel like if people like myself don't make these types of films, the world won't see them. So it's worth the fight. Those are just the challenges. And, with that, there's a lot of, emotional challenges to the type of work that we do, that I do. You're speaking with people a lot about, really challenging moments in their life, or traumatic moments even, and having them be vulnerable with you, as someone who's really empathic. That's hard to take on. Yeah. But it's important to do so. But, I always have to be careful about, checking in with myself and, not burning out, and just, understanding where their story ends and where I begin, and not like taking it on so much.
I get that.
And with documentary, it's like you film for many years and for long periods of time, and you're shooting hours and hours and hours of footage with, let's say, like one person or one event, an incident, and you're watching this footage over and over and over and over and over again. Something happens in that time, you feel like very, isolated, and almost like you're in it with that person. So, you have to kind of just take care of yourself.
You could have been a nurse easily, Michele. Seriously, like it's so parallel to what the nurse goes through, right? Or what the healthcare provider goes through. That empath is like, because I'm thinking about, like, as you were speaking of that, so many nights going home after, days of taking care of people, and it's like, it's in my dreams,
oh my gosh.
It's in my dreams. So like, you're taking it on, like you're really absorbing a lot. And, who's in your corner? Who do you check in with when you, like you say, you check in with yourself, but We
well, I like to be very transparent and open about this. When I was making Matt Shepard is a friend of mine, that was the first time I went and sought a professional help, meaning like I went and engaged with a therapist who helped me while I was creating that film. I just had a safe place, a safe person to talk to just kind of reflect and process, what I was doing as I was, creating that whole film. And that was really helpful. So I really recommend, people just going to seek counseling or therapy when they're going through, difficult periods in their life. There really isn't anything wrong with that.
Agreed.
And that's also something that comes up in Food Roots, that film I was telling you about with restaurateur Billy Deck. He and his family, they went through a lot of very, just really challenging times and experienced a lot of loss and dealt with mental health issues in their family. So the fact that he and his family are so open about it, I think it's really brave, and it really inspires people who watch it to be more open about what they're going through. And I think they feel less alone in that. So I do think that seeking professional advice, counseling, anything like that is a great thing, and it shouldn't be stigmatized. I have a really great community here in LA that helps me out a lot. So I have a lot of great family and friends and just colleagues that I feel I can go to, when I'm having, hardships, or if I just need help, like with the Nurse Unseen. Oh my God, Nurse Unseen would not exist without the help of the community here. I mean, we sold out of that screening October 11th, and we still have 2 weeks to go. And that's because of the community here that's so supportive, not only myself, but my team and our community. It's just such a beautiful thing to see. So that's why I also love LA, because I feel my tribe here and I feel really supported in what I do.
Well, I'm really looking forward to shaking your hand and meeting your colleagues, and hopefully, meeting some more of the community at that October 11th screening. We'll be there at the 7:00. As soon as we saw the tickets, I think when I looked at the screening, we bought the first 20 seats. Yeah, we bought 20 seats.
You should get a prize for that.
But we got like the first 2 rows that are like on the upper level, I guess. And actually, we're going to give away 2 tickets and ask a couple people to come with us. We're taking a group of 20. But, when I saw the story, I really wanted to take some of the people that I've worked with over the years, and I've seen their contribution. Not knowing what I'm to expect in the film yet, I just was like, hey, have you heard of this? Let's go check it out. Let's go have some dinner, and hopefully we'll get to hang out with you now. So really looking forward to that. We're rounding out the hour. It's been a really blessed conversation. I'd like to kind of be selfish here for a second and end with 2 questions. One of them is maybe a comment.
Okay.
So the question would be, as a storyteller, or maybe not a storyteller, but a platform to tell stories, Musings with Morales. Like, what would be your best advice for us, for me, for Paco, to really foster that humanity that you talk of, so that the people that hear can have just a better chance at putting themselves in our guest shoes?
Wow, that's an incredibly difficult question. I think you're off to a great start. Talking to people, giving them a whole hour to really reflect on their own lives. I mean, that's all people, can really ask for. A lot of the time in my work, I realize that some of these people have never been given that opportunity to share, and they're really excited to do so. So I think just to keep going and doing what you're doing, I mean, that's great. You should be doing that, and you probably will be doing that. Don't quit. We
definitely will.
You're really great. You're really great at listening, and I think that's something that I do in my work. I try to create a really safe, open space in which, the person I'm interviewing feels, that they can share, and that I will be a really safe space for them.
Yeah.
And they can be as honest. And sorry, I'm going to backtrack.
Oh, no worries.
When I interview people, a lot of the work in building that relationship happens before the cameras even start rolling.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like before this interview started, you reached out to me on Instagram. We had, a few minutes to talk and get to know one another, just to really establish that connection.
Yeah.
That's something that I also do in my work. And I think that's something that really helps, just letting people know a little bit about yourself so that they know why you're interested in talking to them, and they realize that, hey, you're a good guy and you're going to treat my story with respect. And I think that's...
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, looking forward to shaking hands in a couple of weeks here, and maybe having more conversations with you and your colleagues. Would love to have you actually out to the studio anytime you want to tell more stories or share upcoming events. The second question or comment is, like, what do you know about kidney disease in the United States? Do you know how big it is? How big of a deal it is?
No, I don't. And I'm ashamed to not know because of what happened to my aunt. And I did this at the summit, and why I got all emotional, being in the room with professionals who were caring for her towards the end of her life. She passed away on the way to her dialysis appointment, so she missed it.
Gosh.
And when they found her, she had her purse and she was all dressed up and ready to go in her living room. So, yeah.
I'm so sorry for your loss. And I ask this because, again, I want to make that connection with you and offer myself and our entire network that if you want to find out more about kidney disease, which is our main purpose here, is to really tell this story and share that there are more than 37 million people in the United States suffering kidney disease, that probably in the 600,000 range are undergoing dialysis, and maybe a couple 100,000 are living with transplants, and maybe 100,000 people a year are experiencing or incidental to chronic kidney disease. It's a big deal, and there's a lot that we can do about it, as far as just spreading awareness, lifestyle, rare disorders some of our guests have shared with us. So again, I want to extend our arm and our hand to you, Michele, that if you ever want to learn more about this, and, again, I'll kind of say the selfish side of it is I'm hoping that it would be something that one day might trigger your creative interests and a desire to tell the story that we're experiencing in the United States.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and I appreciate that. And it's definitely something I would be interested in learning more about, especially given, my aunt and my personal.
So last but not least, how do we support you, Michele? You mentioned you mentioned the challenges, which, hey, let's face it, it takes money to create, right? It takes money to innovate.
In this economy, are you kidding?
Yeah. How do we support you? I've looked around. I've seen some different foundations. Is there a way that people can actually, say, hey, I want Michele to tell more or share more stories? How do we do that?
That's really kind. Well, we're all about Nurse Unseen right now. So just visit our website, nurseunseen.com. And there are several ways that you can help that's outlined there. You can make a tax-deductible donation to our film. You can buy a ticket and go to a theater near you in which Nurse Unseen is playing. That really helps. And just, spreading the word about Nurse Unseen, about myself and my work, that is always incredibly helpful.
Will do. We will definitely put our best foot forward. And as I mentioned, we're going to give away a couple tickets, 2 tickets for next week's podcast. We'll do a live announcement, and we'll kind of have a little social exercise to give those away. So if anybody wants to attend the October 11th screening at 7:10 p.m. in Glendale with us. We've got 18 other folks with us that are really great people. We'll watch, we'll converse, and hopefully we'll continue to build on this community. Michele, Josue, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I look forward to meeting in a couple weeks and further conversations.
Thank you so much. This is a pleasure. I really appreciate you very much.
Likewise. Thank you, Paco Ares Paco Chaga, and to our sponsor, Dialysis Education Services. We are signing out. Have a great night, everybody.
This episode has been brought to you by Dialysis Education Services.